Hello, and welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Le Nozze di Figaro. So, Le Nozze di Figaro, or The Marriage of Figaro, is probably one of the more well-known operas in the world. It was written by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and it is sung in Italian. This opera is composed in the classical style, but of course, as I've mentioned in other videos, Mozart has his own style entirely. It is one that is vocally demanding, very clean and symmetrical musical lines, and there's a good balance between recits or recitatives and arias. So what on earth is The Marriage of Figaro actually about? Does marriage even play into it? Well, yes it does, in many different ways. This opera is based on a play which forms the sequel to The Barber of Seville. So in this opera, Count Almaviva and Rosina are married. So Rosina is now known as Countess Almaviva, and they have been married for a while now. Figaro is now the Count's full-time valet and is engaged to the Countess's lady's maid, Susanna. The day before her wedding to Figaro, however, Susanna is rather worried. She confesses to Figaro that the Count has been pursuing her for some time now, with the intention of seducing her before their wedding. Figaro is outraged, as is Susanna. So together, they plot with the Countess to foil the Count's plans. Mix in a few more humorous subplots, and you have a comedy worthy of Shakespeare. As I said earlier, this is the second of 3 plays by Beaumarchais that follow the same set of characters, being Count Almaviva, Rosina, and Figaro, and all of the other people who move in and out of their lives. And so because the plays existed before the operas, The Marriage of Figaro was composed as an opera before The Barber of Seville was, even though chronologically they go in the opposite order. Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. This play was much more controversial than The Barber of Seville, however, when it first premiered. It portrays servants helping and getting the upper hand on their masters. And those masters, of course, were the ones funding the theaters and the arts. It is also, as far as I know, one of the few pieces that address head-on the fact that men in power often use that power to sexually abuse women. I mean, what else would you call feudal law, what is known in the opera as droit de seigneur, that allowed lords of the manor to sleep with their female servants and tenants on their wedding night? It may be a comedy, but that doesn't mean that this opera doesn't deal with heavy themes. There are so many important and famous musical moments that should be highlighted in this opera. So there will be more than usual, but I did have to narrow it down a bit, which is why I encourage you to watch the full opera at some point. I will have recommendations of versions later on. The first piece is, of course, the overture itself, but after that, the first piece that we hear is also quite famous and tends to make a lasting impression. It was the first piece that I heard in isolation when I was in high school, and I remembered it ever since, even though I knew nothing about the rest of the opera. It is colloquially known as Cinque, dieci, or 5, 10, as those are the first words that are sung by Figaro. The scene opens on Figaro measuring a room to see if his and Susanna's bed will fit in it. Sexy stuff. However, Susanna doesn't notice this. She is trying on the hat or wedding veil that she is going to wear at their wedding and trying to get Figaro's attention. What I love about this piece is that it mirrors a true conversation. Figaro's thoughts of measuring and counting follow one particular melody. Susanna's thoughts of admiring her hat or veil and trying to get Figaro to admire it follows a completely separate melody. But they are both things that need to be done in order to prepare for the wedding, so they rather fit nicely together. And so that, to me, mirrors a true conversation. Sometimes two people can be talking at cross purposes, but they still fit together because they are trying to start their new life together. The lyrics, as far as I know, leave a lot of interpretation as to how this scene could be played out. I don't know that there are any stage directions in the original score, as I do not have a copy of it myself, but opera is a lot like Shakespeare in terms of directors often have free range to do what they would like with these stage directions. You can play it very straight, or you can play with what Susanna and Figaro are actually talking about here, as this clip does, which I have included below. The next very important aria belongs to Figaro soon after this scene, and after he and Susanna have the conversation where she reveals to him the Count's plans. This aria is known as Se vuol ballare, or If You Want to Dance. I have included a clip down below of Luca Pizzaroni singing this aria from the same production as earlier. There are several things that I love about this piece. First of all, it emphasizes why this play was often banned in the first place, as the entire piece is Figaro addressing, in apostrophe, the Count is not actually there, but he is addressing the Count and saying, "If you want to dance, sir, I'll teach you how to dance. I'll play you a merry little tune." And it is out and out criticism from a servant to his master. Because he is talking about dancing, there is a very slow dance-like rhythm to the whole piece. But that slowness and that preciseness can also speak of a barely contained rage that Figaro is now feeling. This aria also heavily uses the French horn, and the French horn is often known as the cuckold's instrument in the orchestra. It signifies when someone is being cheated on. Speaking of that sudden rage, there are also many dynamic shifts in this aria. There are shifts between forte and piano all over the place, which show how much Figaro is desperately trying to contain his emotions, starting to get worked up and worked up and worked up, and then he pulls himself back. I especially love when he gives himself the directions, ma piano. He's literally telling himself to decrescendo in the music, while he's telling himself, but wait a minute. The orchestra starts out very, very sparsely, but it also has those dynamic shifts to mirror Figaro's emotion, and they support him entirely throughout all of them. By the end, Figaro tells us that he has concocted a plan to foil the Count's schemes. But is his emotion at the end one of triumph or fury? You listen and you decide. Or think about how you would sing it. What emotional note would you end it on? In addition, this piece is incredibly singable. It is very easy to sing. It gets stuck in your head very easily. Since it is out and out criticism of masters, do you think this was Mozart inciting the masses to think similarly? Some of his contemporaries did, but what do you think? The next piece that I want to highlight is one of my favorites, Voi che sapete, or You Women Who Know What Love Is. This is a piece that you may recognize, especially if you are a major Austen fan like myself. In the 1995 Pride and Prejudice, this is the piece that Elizabeth Bennet sings when they are visiting Pemberley. And thus it works its way back into the score in what is known on the soundtrack as Thinking About Lizzie, as Mr. Darcy wanders through Pemberley late at night, remembering that afternoon together. It also has a special place in my heart because it is sung by the character Cherubino, who is a mezzo. And I am a mezzo, so Cherubino will always hold a special place in my heart. I have included 2 clips here. The first is a clip of Kate Lindsay singing this piece in a 2015 production at the San Francisco Opera. And I also adore Kate Lindsay and the way she plays this role. Also included is a link to a Google Doc, as this video does not have subtitles, and it includes the recitative before the aria. So I have transcribed the subtitles myself, and so please have that document and the video running side by side so you can read along with the lyrics. This piece tells of Cherubino, who is a young nobleman living in the Count Almaviva's court. He's a young teenage boy, and he falls in love with every woman that he sees. But he especially has a crush on the Countess. And so he has written this poem, this song, about all of his feelings, in which he begs the women who hear it, tell me what these feelings mean. They're so new. I'm feeling all of these things. I freeze, I burn. Tell me what this is. What do I do? Now, it is the director's choice whether or not this song succeeds, but it should succeed at some point, because we know from the Beaumarchais plays that things do begin to happen between Cherubino and the Countess in play number 3. So it cannot be completely farcical and silly. One of my favorite pieces to watch was a masterclass that Joyce DiDonato gave at Carnegie Hall a while back to a student who was learning this piece. So I will link that video down below as well, because watching her work on this aria and break it down piece by piece is truly incredible to watch, and she brings up some amazing points about how one should play Cherubino, or how one could play him. One of the major things that she highlights is the legato, the long sustained melody must be sustained in order to reel in the Countess and to reel in the audience. As soon as you break that vocal line for even a second, you've lost your hold on them. Because Cherubino is questioning what is happening to him, there are many unresolved chords at the ends of phrases that have a beautiful pain to them. And Da Ponte, Mozart's lyricist, does a beautiful job of matching the poetry to what is happening in the music. Often it switches into minor keys and unresolved chords to mirror the desperation, the pain, and yet the pleasure of that pain that is involved in falling in unrequited love, and in what I think of as the bridge of this aria, where Cherubino describes everything that he physically feels and cannot explain. There's a desperation to it, which you can hear. There's an increasing, modulating, upward shifting pattern to each section. Every section starts on one note higher than the last. It's building and building to this crescendo, and then finally comes back down. It can be quite sexy if played correctly, which I think Kate Lindsay does. The next piece that I had to highlight is one of the Count's arias in Act 3 called Hai già vinta la causa, or We Have Won the Cause Already, which may seem a strange title, but bear with me, I will explain. Susanna and the Count have agreed to an assignation as part of a plan to fool him, and he is thrilled, and as Susanna leaves, she runs into Figaro outside, and she tells him that he has succeeded, and he says, "Ha ha, we have won the case already." But what they don't know is that the Count has heard that, and this entire recit and aria is his reaction to that realization of betrayal. There was no good video to include here, so I have included a link to an audio recording of the Swedish baritone Peter Mattei singing this aria, and I love the way he acts it. You can hear every emotion in his voice. There are several important things to point out. First of all, this aria is our one opportunity to get a deep glimpse into Count Almaviva as a character. He has never been alone before this, but here in Act 3, he is entirely alone, laying his soul bare to all of us. But with that said, you can play this aria in so many different ways that as an audience member, there's a lot to analyze. First of all, of course he is upset at being betrayed, but why precisely is he upset? There are several key lines that I would like to pull out. Is he just being proud and snobbish, as when he says, pagarla? In qual maniera? Pay her back? How can he? As Figaro is under a debt from another woman, which could work in the Count's favor. And he says he can never pay her back. Of course he can't, he's a servant. So is he quite simply relying on his position? Is he selfish? And thus he is angry at not being able to have everything he wants? Or the line that has always stuck out most to me is the fact that he mentions the idea that other people will laugh at his unhappiness. And that to me has given me a huge window into the Count's soul, is that he is afraid of ridicule. He is afraid of being laughed at. And that's why he is going through all of these machinations to try and make himself seem important and in control. And that to me is really rather touching and rather sad. So I have of course included the track for you to listen to, as well as a link to the translated lyrics, so you too can follow along and form your own judgments. Next, I had to include one of the Countess's arias. And this aria, in fact, directly follows Hai già vinta la causa. And it is called Dovesono, or Where Are Those Beautiful Moments? And again, this is one of the few times when the Countess is alone. But this time, unlike the first time we meet her, she is not purely wallowing in self-pity and misery. I would argue that this aria isn't exactly a glimpse into the Countess, but more a glimpse into their marriage than anything else, as it begins with the Countess lamenting the beautiful, loving moments that they had when they were first married, and wondering what happened, what changed, which really changes our perspective of the Count, knowing that he was capable of those sweet, loving moments. There is some good in him, or there was once. Again, towards the beginning, the orchestration is also very sparse, so the Countess is very exposed in her grief, which is also terrifying for a singer because your technique is therefore very exposed. But the difference comes in towards the end, when the Countess realizes that it doesn't have to be this way. And she comes up with a plan to try and foil the Count's plans and try and restore those wonderful moments that they had. And the tone and the orchestra completely changes. The tempo picks up. It switches into a lovely major key. She is moving. Her ideas are flowing. And in that section, there's a wonderful moment of interplay where the Countess will sing a line and the orchestra will mirror it. And she will sing a line and the orchestra will mirror it. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here and tell you the story of when I was in one of Lisette Oropesa's masterclasses this summer. And she used this aria as an example of when you're trying to think through how to act a particular aria. And she, of course, always encourages you to translate the lyrics in English, as any singer should. but she encouraged you, don't translate them literally. Of course, do that to begin with. But think about, what is the Countess truly saying? What is the orchestra truly saying back? Because this back and forth is like a conversation. And forgive me, it gets a little bit sweary, but she explained it like this, and you will never listen to this aria without hearing it ever again. She says that the Countess sings, "We're gonna do it," and the orchestra goes, "Yes, girl, yes we are. We're gonna do this thing. Yes, girl, tell us what." And the Countess sings, "We're gonna change his asshole heart. We're gonna change his asshole heart." And the orchestra goes, "Yes, girl, yes. We're gonna do this. I'm so excited, yes." And forgive my terrible and undervoiced singing. I am not alone in the house. I didn't want to scare people, nor can I hit all of the top notes. I am a mezzo, I am not a true soprano, as the Countess should be. But it does end with that same sense of triumph and playfulness. It's truly a masterpiece. The final piece that I couldn't leave any video about Marriage of Figaro without speaking of is another one that is extremely famous, and it is vieni, non tardar, or Love, do not wait too long, do not tarry. And I have included a clip down below from the same 2015 production in San Francisco with Lisette Oropesa as Susanna. It is also not subtitled, so I have included a separate link to lyrics for you to follow along. I can't give you much context as to how Susanna ends up in this point, as it would spoil many of the twists and turns of Act 4. But what I can say is that Susanna is singing of her longing to be with her lover, which we know means Figaro, but Figaro doesn't exactly know that. Again, it has beautiful long legato lines, a simple, beautiful melody that speak of that same longing and loving. And it again has many unresolved chords and then switches back to resolve them. It speaks of that same pleasure and pain of love that Cherubino referenced in Voi, sapete. And you may recognize it from many places, including another Austen reference, being the Becoming Jane soundtrack. In the film Becoming Jane, Jane and Tom Lefroy meet again at a concert in Bath many years later, and I believe in that concert, the singer is singing Vieni. If you would like to hear these and many other moments in full context, then I would recommend several productions to you. The first is the 2015 San Francisco production. It is my all-time favorite. They went with a historical setting, and the cast is my dream cast. It starred, as you will have seen, Lisette Oropesa, Kate Lindsay, Nadine Sierra, Luca Pizzaroni, and Philippe Sly, among others. It also starred John Del Carlo, the famous bass baritone, and I believe it was one of the last things he did before he passed in 2016. If you can't get a hold of that version, another good version to watch is this production starring Luca Pizzaroni, Rosemary Joshua, among others, from, I believe, from the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris, which was done in 2004 or 2005, I believe, somewhere in that range. Another wonderful version is an audio version. These CDs were put out by the publisher Deutsche Grammophon a few years ago, and there's a whole series of them featuring all of Mozart's operas. This one is one of my favorites, as it stars Luca Pizzaroni again, Sonia Yoncheva, Thomas Hampson, Christian Karg, among others. Oh, Philippe Sly was in it. I didn't know it. Of course, any production of Le Nozze di Figaro is usually very enjoyable. I have seen several at the Met myself live. So you can of course track one down on their on-demand player, or indeed from any other theater, local or international. Let me know down in the comments if these pieces intrigue you, if you love this opera as much as I do, or if you have come to love it since listening to all of these pieces. I would love to chat with you about any and all things, and until next time, be safe, be well, and happy listening. Bye everyone.